In this screencast, I'm going to go through the NWM window manager and keyboard shortcuts and things like that. Just because it's a lot easier to show people things on video than it is to explain them in text. So NWM is short for node.js window manager, and it's loosely based on DWM, which is another window manager. I think the first important concept that I should cover is what is a window manager exactly, because people are coming in and they've had experience using GNOME or KDE, and I think they have different kinds of expectations. So GNOME and KDE are desktop environments, so they provide a UI toolkit. They provide additional things like file managers, desktops with icons, search, and so on and so on. So they're a lot more than just window managers. They're also they also provide the tools to build different kinds of applications and so on. So NWM is not a desktop environment. It doesn't provide any fancy icons or things like that to click. It's fairly minimalistic, and it just takes care of positioning windows on your screen. And you can use both GNOME and KDE applications with NWM. So there are no compatibility issues there. It's just that the desktop experience is a lot more minimal when you're using a tiling window manager like NWM. Okay, so now that we have that out of the way, let's get started. Um, here I have here I have VMware Workstation. I'm running Arch Linux, and I'm just doing this because it's a lot easier to do the screen recording like this, though it's been quite a pain actually. Um, so let's get started. I'm just going to start X11 because with Arc you don't necessarily or you don't get a default login manager. So with Ubuntu and things like that, you're going to have a little bit nicer process because you have a UI for logging in and starting X11. But I'm going to start X11 here. And we're in NWM. All you have is a blank screen and a cursor. So it seems all a little bit overwhelming or at least daunting. And you just have to start by knowing one keyboard shortcut because from that one keyboard shortcut you can access the web and then just look up the rest of the information that you need. And that one shortcut is Windows Shift Enter. Now let me do a quick thing with VMware in order to get it to full screen. Right, yep, so that's a lot nicer. Windows Shift Enter launches a new terminal. And here you can see that on the screen, and it's already been maximized. This is the basic tiling behavior. If you haven't used a tiling window manager before, um, the basic idea is that windows are arranged next to each other. So I'm going to start a second terminal, Windows Shift Enter. Now I have two terminals next to each other. And the basic idea here is that windows are always put next to each other instead of overlapping. And that allows you to see all of your apps and all of the content in your apps immediately instead of having to minimize windows or do other kind of like moving them around and things like that manually. It's all done by the window manager, and then you can do small tweaks to it yourself depending on the situation. So why would you want to have this? Well, the reason why tiling window managers are nice is that they allow you to increase your productivity. You don't ever have to switch from the keyboard to the mouse unless you want to. Your windows will automatically take enough space, and like you're maximizing screen real estate because you're not using any screen real estate for things like close and minimize buttons and menus and toolbars and things like that. So it is a lot more efficient, or at least once you get used to it. but it of course takes a while to get used to. You don't get any pretty icons or desktop environment, but you can of course run any applications that you want to. So let's start off by running Chromium. Here we go. So that's Google Chrome. That's the open source version of Google Chrome. Um, and let's start off. In fact, before we do that, let's set the desktop background. So as I mentioned, there isn't really much that's built into NWM, and this is kind of on purpose. I want to keep it as simple as possible. Luckily, there are a lot of open source applications that allow you to do to improve the experience. One of them is called Nitrogen, and that's just a tool that allows you to set your desktop background. So I'm going to run nitrogen dash dash restore, which just restores my previous desktop. And there you can see we've changed from blank screen to a desktop background. There are several alternatives, so you should just check it out. Um, Googling with Xmonad or DWM generally comes up with a lot of helpful tips on how you can set up your system with a tiling window manager. So now we have an app. I'm going to start a second app, Sublime Text. Here we go. So now we have a lot of windows. I'm going to close this terminal by typing exit, and I'm done. So now I have three different windows here on screen. Um, now as you can see here on the left-hand side, there's one window that's taking half the screen space, and this is the main window. And then you have this other half of the screen that's taken up by the rest of the windows, and these are like the secondary windows in this particular layout. There are different layouting algorithms, and you can switch between those by pressing Windows and space. So Windows space. This layout's called the monocle layout. It's also known as full screen. So you just have a single window that's focused on full screen, and the rest of the windows are hidden. Let's switch again, Windows and space. And now we have the wide layout. And in the wide layout, the main screen is at the top, and then the secondary windows are at the bottom, which is useful for some cases if you prefer to have, say, some reference material or something like that. Let's switch the layout again. So there's a fourth layout, which is called grid, and grid looks like this. In that layout, all the windows take up space, and yeah, that's fairly useful if you have like multiple things you want to follow. For instance, you'd have like logging, log monitoring, I don't know, things like that. Let's press Windows space again to get back. So we've cycled through all the layouts, and now we're back to the default vertical tiling. So that's how you switch between layouts, Windows and space. Now that we have all these different windows, how would you focus to them? Well, you can move focus by moving your mouse. So right now I'm here. I can move to this window and here, okay, and so on. So focus follows mouse. So basically that's one way to change focus. The other way is to press Windows J and Windows K, and that allows you to cycle through the different windows. It's a little hard to see here because I'm on VMware, and there's a limitation here compared to running natively, which I'm just not going to get into too much. But the difference is that if you're running this on a natively, so not in a virtualized virtual machine, then you're going to get a focus rectangle. So the borders of the windows have a 1 pixel border, and that border is going to be colored brightly um, for the focus window, and that makes it a lot easier to see if you're not using the mouse to change focus. Both ways work. So either moving the mouse or Windows J and Windows K take you to a different focus window on your current screen. All right. Um, I think this screen is still a little bit messy, so we have a lot of windows on a single screen. Let's start using some workspaces. So workspaces are basically just separate areas where you can put windows. For instance, the way I usually work is I use first the workspace number 1 for web browsing and 2, 3, 4 for coding projects, and then workspace number 9 is usually used for monitoring. So I might have some logs that I'm tailing or other things like that. And you can come up with your own different schemes based on what you want to do. Um, so let's first switch workspaces, and this is pretty easy because this is the main way in which you manage Windows. Um, let's press Windows 2 to move to the second workspace. And as you can see, it's all empty. You can see my beautiful desktop wallpaper. And let's move to screen number 1. So all the windows are on on workspace number 1. Uh, Now I'm going to move this coding window to this one that I'm currently hovering over, to workspace number 2 by pressing Windows Shift 2. So let's switch to workspace number 2, and there you see I moved the window, and now it's taking up the full workspace. Let's take this console window and move that also to screen number 2. So Windows Shift 2 again while I'm focusing on that, and go back to by pressing Windows 2 to that particular workspace. And you can see I've moved 2 windows now into this workspace. Let's go back, Windows 1, move this guy to third screen, Windows Shift 3, and now I've pretty much arranged my windows a little bit better. So it's pretty simple. Windows and the number key in order to go to a particular workspace, and Windows Shift number key in order to move a window to a particular workspace. Now let's have a look at how we can tweak this a little bit. So let's go to workspace number 2. Here we have 2 windows. The way I generally like to work is having a full screen editor, or almost full screen editor, and then have a small space for a terminal, mostly for running git commands like git status, git commit, and so on and so on. But anyway, so the first thing I want to do is I want to swap the location of these 2 windows. And I can do that by pressing Windows Tab. Pressing Windows Tab switches the main area, or the main window. Makes the currently focused window the main window. So basically, it just switches them around like that. This is the way I want to have it, so that the window is on the left-hand side. Now let's resize the main window area. So you have 2 options for this, and this is mostly because there are some operating system shortcuts that sometimes conflict, particularly when you're running in a virtual box. Um, the first option is Windows H and Windows L, and those resize the screen like this. As you can see, so H makes the main window smaller, and L makes it bigger. You can also use Windows F10 and F11 um, if you prefer. Those are the alternative keys, and usually because those don't really clash with any operating system. So here we go. I've resized the main area here, my terminal there. So I could be running some additional git commands or things like that on there, and then I still have my large text editor on the right hand side. So let's go switch back to workspace number 1. There's one more thing I need to show you, and that is how to close Windows. We're almost done. Windows Shift Enter again starts a new terminal, right? So let's start a couple of terminals. Windows Shift C closes the current terminal. Again, Windows Shift C, Windows Shift C. There's also one more thing that is multiple monitor support. You can move windows between monitors by pressing Windows Shift comma and period, but I can't show you that because I don't have multiple screens set up right now with this recording software. So let me do something else. Let's go to Hacker News. Here we go. I'm just going to grab this window and just drop it here. And as you can see, I now have a little bit nicer view. So both of my windows have been automatically tiled. And this is fairly nice because it allows you to organize your windows fairly efficiently. And then there's one more shortcut, Windows Shift Q, and that quits NWM.